The Legend of Zelda is a Japanese video game series owned and developed by Nintendo, and it was first created by Shigeru Miyamoto and Takashi Tezuka on February 21st, 1986. The original game was developed for the Famicom Disk System, better known as the Nintendo Entertainment System in the West. Since its inception, the series has become increasingly popular and iconic, spawning multiple sequels, with the most recent release being The Legend of Zelda Echoes of Wisdom, released for the Nintendo Switch on September 26, 2024. In terms of the theme of the setting, the overall aesthetic of the series is very similar to that of medieval Europe and Western fantasy as a whole, often showcasing European-styled castles and outfits. The original inspiration for the first game, The Legend of Zelda, came from Western media such as The Legend of King Arthur, J.R.R. Tolkien's fantasy novels, and the film Peter Pan. However, despite the incredibly evident influence of Western fantasy and media on the franchise, as the original development team and influences were replaced by others over time, later installments would end up drawing more elements from Japanese culture and religion, most notably Buddhism and ancient Japanese art. These influences can be seen in both the narrative and lore of the series, character and environment designs, as well as its use of iconography that is reminiscent of both Buddhist and Japanese culture. Due to the sheer number of games and the complexity of the established lore and story in the series, only 2 games will have their summaries and ties to Japanese culture and religion analyzed. The 2 games that will be covered are The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword and The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. These games were chosen because of the prevalence of both Buddhist themes and art, as well as the usage of Japanese art forms in the art and design of the games. The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword is the 18th installment in the series. It was created to celebrate the series' 25th anniversary and was created with the intention of serving as a beginning to the entire series' narrative. Before the game begins, there is a prologue depicting the events that take place before the events of the game. Demise, the Demon King, leads an army of demons to slaughter humanity in order to take the Triforce, a magical artifact created by the 3 golden goddesses that has the ability to grant any wish. The goddess Hylia places the remainder of humanity on a plot of land along with the Triforce and sends it high into the sky, eventually becoming Skyloft, as Hylia, along with the remaining surface dwellers, seal away Demise, restoring peace to the world. Many millennia later, the plot of the game begins, which revolves around Link and Zelda, 2 students of the Skyloft Knight Academy who grew up together and are each other's love interest. Zelda, after being sucked down to the surface via a dark tornado, is pursued by Link, who heads after her in order to save her. But before he leaves on his journey, Link obtains the Goddess Sword, a sword made by Hylia in order to aid the prophesied hero who will finally defeat Demise. As Link explores and searches the surface, he meets an old woman living in a dilapidated temple who acts as a guide and gives him hints about Zelda's location. Link also encounters the demon lord Girahim, a demon who is determined to revive his old master Demise, an act that requires Zelda as a sort of spirit maiden. After exploring the surface more, Link learns that monsters had captured Zelda, but he is eventually able to catch up to her, learning that she was saved by a servant of the goddess Impa. Zelda tries to reunite with Link, but Impa tells her to focus on her supposed mission and scolds Link for failing to save Zelda from earlier monsters, doubting that he is truly the chosen hero. Pursuing Zelda further, Link once again catches up with both her and Impa at the Gate of Time, a magical gate that allows the user to travel back and forth through different periods of time. But when trying to finally reunite with Zelda, Girahim interrupts and tries to attack Zelda before being held back by Impa. However, Girahim is stronger than Impa, and despite her best efforts, Girahim breaks free and almost kills her before being distracted by Link, causing Impa to change her view about Link's legitimacy as the chosen hero. Impa and Zelda are able to escape through the Gate of Time before destroying it, causing Girahim to once again lose them and threaten Link that if they meet again, he will surely kill him. Link returns to the old woman, who shows him a second Gate of Time that is hidden within the temple they stand in, but in order to open it, Link must travel throughout the surface and strengthen his goddess sword with 3 sacred flames, only obtained after passing trials left by the golden goddesses for those searching for them. Before Link can do this, however, Demise, in the form of a colossal and bizarre monster, breaks free of his seal and tries to reach and destroy the old lady's temple in order to destroy the Gate of Time. Link is able to beat back Demise, but throughout the game, the seal breaks 2 more times, showing that the seal placed on Demise is weakening and that there isn't much time left. Link is able to strengthen the Goddess Sword using the Sacred Flames and creates the Master Sword, a sword that routinely reappears throughout the franchise as the ultimate blade to repel evil, and with it is able to open the second Gate of Time. Stepping through the Gate of Time, he arrives in a past version of the Lady's Temple to find Zelda. After Link finds her, Zelda explains that after purifying herself at various locations on the surface, she remembered that she is actually a reincarnation of the goddess Hylia, and that after sealing Demise, she knew the seal wouldn't last, so she devised a plan to reincarnate as a mortal in order to sleep, which strengthens the seal, and use Link to get the Triforce and wish for Demise's death. After defeating Demise, Zelda awakens from her long slumber. However, Girahim suddenly appears and kidnaps her in order to retreat to the past. as Demise still lives in the past, and uses Zelda's soul to resurrect his master. Link pursues Girahim through time and defeats him after a lengthy battle, but it is too late, as the ritual to sacrifice Zelda and revive Demise had been completed, and Demise successfully returned to the mortal world. In a climactic final battle, Link fights one-on-one with Demise and is able to finally defeat and seal Demise away for good, fulfilling the prophecy. However, just before Demise perishes, he curses both Link and Zelda to be infinitely reincarnated through the blood of the goddess and the spirit of the hero, again and again, forced to do battle with evil for eternity and for the land to never know true peace, setting the scene for the rest of the series. As shown thus far, there are Buddhist themes woven into the narrative of Skyward Sword and by extension, the entire Legend of Zelda franchise, as at the end of Skyward Sword, Demise places a curse of endless reincarnation upon the world, forcing those with the spirit of the hero and the blood of the goddess to be eternally locked in battle with evil forces that serve as reincarnations of Demise's hatred and malice. This curse parallels the Buddhist cycle of reincarnation, and while it isn't brought on by an evil curse, it does trap everyone in an endless cycle of life and death, and the only way to escape it is to reach nirvana or enlightenment. A second aspect of Buddhism in the narrative is seen in Zelda, as she travels along the surface in order to purify herself in the sacred springs located at the end of 2 of the dungeons in-game. The reason for the purification is so that before she makes her sacrifice, she may regain her memories as the goddess Hylia. The overarching themes of purification and reincarnation are very prevalent in Skyward Sword, but they also appear in other titles as well, showing that Buddhism has possibly always been involved in the Legend of Zelda in some shape or form. Another stronger aspect of Buddhism in Skyward Sword appears in the game's 4th dungeon, titled the Ancient Cistern. Link ventures into the dungeon in order to acquire one of the 3 sacred flames. The dungeon has heavy influence from Buddhist iconography and myth, as the first thing the player sees when entering the dungeon is a giant statue that bears a striking resemblance to the Buddha in the center of the room. On the statue are symbols that are supposed to be keys to solving a door puzzle. However, the symbols seem to resemble chakra wheels, although it is possible that they are shaped like that due to the mechanism keeping the door locked in the first place being wheel-shaped as well. Adding to the Buddhist iconography, some of the textures on the walls of the dungeon are decorated with patterns that resemble lotus flowers, which symbolize purity and spiritual awakening. There's also the matter of the blessed idol, which serves as a key to get to the end of the dungeon, as the idol itself bears a striking resemblance to the Buddha, and it sits on a lotus flower, just as the Buddha is commonly depicted to be doing. Furthermore, the entire dungeon is based on a story called The Spider's Thread by Ryunosuke Akutagawa. In the story, the historical Buddha, after seeing a single act of compassion from a sinner in hell, feels compassion from the sinner and sends a spider thread to carry him to safety. The sinner climbs the thread only to realize that the other sinners are also climbing it. Fearing that the thread would break from the weight, the sinner shouts that the thread is his and his alone. As this happens, the thread snaps and all of the sinners fall back down to hell. The story is reflected in the dungeon, as when it is first entered, it resembles a pure and pristine building filled with clean water and a smiling statue. Even the enemies found in the dungeon look elegant to some extent. However, eventually the player will need to descend into the dungeon's basement, and when they do, the entire atmosphere changes, reflecting the hell part of the story. The dungeon becomes bleak and cursed, and all the enemies found in this part resemble zombies. Eventually, the player is able to escape this area by climbing a rope to the exit. However, when they do so, a horde of zombies will follow them up and attempt to drag them back down, mimicking the original story. Overall, Skyward Sword displays Buddhist themes and art through its narrative in Demise's Curse and Zelda's Journey, as well as the aesthetic and iconography present in the Dungeon of the Ancient Cistern, which mimics a Japanese Buddhist story about a man attempting to escape hell only to fail due to his greed. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild is the 25th installment in the Legend of Zelda series and serves as a departure from the linear format of the games that preceded it and a return to form of the original exploration-focused games of the NES. The plot revolves around a reincarnation of Link as he wakes up from an ancient shrine with all of his memories gone. He quickly learns that the land he woke up in, the Kingdom of Hyrule, was devastated by a calamity 100 years ago at the hands of a being referred to as Calamity Ganon, a creature of pure malice and hatred that is yet another reincarnation of Demise. Through the ghost of the old king of Hyrule, Link learns that he was once one of 5 champions who were to serve as guardians of the realm, as well as the personal knight of the king's daughter, Princess Zelda. Though all the champions including Link fought valiantly, they were defeated by servants of Calamity Ganon. Link only escaped this fate due to Zelda taking him to the Shrine of Resurrection and heading off to Hyrule Castle to seal Ganon away herself. What happens after this is largely up to the player, as the game is designed to be open-ended. However, should the player wish to engage with the story, they can find memories that explain what happened 100 years ago. The memories focus heavily on Zelda as a character, detailing her grudge against Link as she views him as a reminder of her failures both as the kingdom's princess and as the one who will eventually seal Ganon away. Throughout the memories, Zelda tries to bathe herself in the waters of 3 sacred springs in order to awaken her dormant powers. This is, however, often in vain, as it isn't until the last moment when Link is on his last legs defending her from attackers that her powers awaken and save Hyrule from total annihilation. In the end, Link travels to Hyrule Castle in order to defeat Ganon and is ultimately successful, saving Zelda, who due to her extensive use of sealing magic against Ganon for 100 years, put herself in a state of suspended animation and thus hadn't aged over that period, and is able to seal away the calamity for good, allowing the spirits of the king and the champions to rest in peace. While Breath of the Wild doesn't have as overt Buddhist themes as Skyward Sword did, it still has a very evident influence from Japanese culture as a whole. One of the most iconic enemies from the game, the Guardians, have their designs very strongly based on pottery from the Jomon period in Japan from 14,000 to 300 BCE. The ancient Jomon period was characterized by the Jomon people, hunter-gatherers who left extensive amounts of artifacts ranging from tools to pottery. The Jomon pottery is very unique in that it was characterized by the long bands of clay placed on the pottery in circular and swirl patterns. The Jomon pottery found today has a striking resemblance to the Guardian designs in Breath of the Wild, as it was stated in an interview that the Jomon-based design was used in order to give the Guardians an ancient feel, as in lore they were created by an ancient high-tech civilization known as the Sheikah with the purpose of fighting the Calamity. However, that backfired, as Calamity Ganon was able to possess them and turn them against their users. This Jomon aesthetic isn't only seen on the Guardians, however, they can be seen on anything created by the ancient Sheikah, from weapons to the shrine Link was put to sleep in, as well as the massive divine beasts that were piloted by the champions. The settlement of the modern Sheikah, Kakariko Village, is also reminiscent of Japanese culture, having a soundtrack that includes instruments used in traditional East Asian and Japanese music, as well as the architectural style many of the buildings have being based off of buildings from historical periods such as the Jomon, Asuka, and Shinto periods, as well as modern rural houses found in Japan today. Even the surrounding landscape is strongly reminiscent of East Asian art, with the surrounding mountains resembling the alum lump seen in Chinese landscape paintings. There are even gates resembling Shinto torii that lead through the valleys to the hidden village. In terms of Buddhism, there is less overt reference to it, but at the end of shrines, which are mini dungeons scattered across Hyrule, are mummified Sheikah monks who will give Link items required to get power-ups. These monks seem to be based off of real-world Sokushinbutsu mummy monks, who practice an extreme form of asceticism in medieval Japan, and it was believed that they would die from starvation and thirst and be mummified alive. This practice was banned as religious suicide by Emperor Meiji in 1879, so it is no longer practiced today. Overall, while Breath of the Wild does not contain an entire area based off of Buddhist iconography like Skyward Sword, it does present numerous character and architectural designs inspired by ancient Jomon Japanese art and architecture, in the form of various buildings and weapons created by the ancient Sheikah, as well as Japanese practices of Buddhism which are reflected in the Sheikah monks of Hyrule's shrines. In conclusion, The Legend of Zelda, while being primarily based on Western fantasy, has demonstrated that it carries significant influence from East Asian culture and religion in the form of the Buddhist themes woven into the overarching narrative, Buddhist iconography and ancient Japanese architecture and area designs, and Jomon pottery and character designs. It is likely that Buddhist themes and Japanese artworks will have a place in many future installments in the series, as after the establishment of the reincarnation cycle in Skyward Sword, the succeeding titles that follow have shown to acknowledge the cycle in some way or form, be it through lore implications, outright referring to the many incarnations of good and evil, or even through the art directors drawing on Japanese art for inspiration for various designs throughout the series, showing that despite originating from a love of Western fantasy and media, the series has not been afraid to display its Japanese roots in its depiction of Buddhist iconography and ancient Japanese architecture and art. This video was written by one of my friends for his art history final essay and sent to me in full a while back with sources. He also helped me on this other video a while back. You can check out his art on Blue Sky here, link in the description. He posts art and stuff from time to time, so do check out his stuff if you're interested. And with that, that's all for today. More videos to come.